Well, hello again. Filet mignon coming to you from medium rare poetry and the demilitarised zone of southeast Queensland in Australia. Not militarised like some parts of America, which brings us to today's poem. I know I'm 9 days late, or even 10 days late, but I wanted to write a poem on the assembly of 800 generals and admirals that Pete Hegseth and DJT arranged for on the 30th of September in the United States. And how you try and fit 2 hours of complete, utter rubbish into a 5-minute poem is a bit tricky. So that's why I'm a bit late. Sorry about that. But anyway, today's poem is entitled General Assembly. General Assembly by Filet Mignon. The bugle call was sounded for the top brass to adhere to the latest standing order that in 2 days to appear at Quantico Marine Base with their medals all on show, the mission labelled secret at the Camouflage Chateau. The scramble was a frenzy from deployments round the globe, from ships and planes and bunkers like a swirling khaki strobe. With military precision that this crowd is honoured for, the admirals and the generals now assembled on the floor. Security was heightened, this conglomeration foolish. Whoever organised this bash was definitely ghoulish. It had the smell of Miller, the suspected gross debaucher. He and he alone could cruelly organise this torture. The cream of US forces took their allocated places. The mood within was sombre, with a sea of solemn faces. The stage was decorated with a giant stars and stripes. Pinched from the movie pattern, it had cinematic hype. The keynote speech was listed to bore anyone to death, especially when delivered by the DefSec Pete Hog's Breath. Fresh from his private powder room within the Pentagon, in Fox News Blue now strode the master of the echelon, commencing without manners as he held the senior rank, condemned the wizened gathering whose faces drew a blank. It seemed that Pete was paranoid at how his team should look, so with his axe throw mastery he threw at them the book. The way to woo your audience is not to hurl abuse, but Major Pete was cowardly, his etiquette obtuse. He railed against the notion that this force endorsed inclusion. His army should be whitewashed with no girls, was his delusion. He told the generals outright that a bunch of them were fat, that they would all have PT tests, a He-Man habitat. And unshorn admirals would be shaved, there'd be no room for beardos. Appearance was now paramount, and he would toss the weirdos. His forces could no longer peddle any form of woke. Any ugly history would be napalmed up in smoke. He lectured personnel who held the nation's secret codes, upon whose shoulders battle plans would never be disclosed. And all this bull was coming from the king-sized bucket mouth, who'd signalled all and sundry of a strike that near went south. Appearance? Such hypocrisy! The bottle was his shrine. The serial philanderer could barely toe the line. New rules of war engagement would forever be disparaged. Oh, that was cute from someone who ignored the rules of marriage. Inspector General's office would be reshaped to his liking. Their probe into the DefSec wouldn't touch this reborn Viking. All blowers of the whistle and complainers near and far would be detained at Leavenworth to whinge about the bars. So at the door were NDAs for all of them to sign. Their rank would be abolished if they opted to decline. The keg's breath speech was just an ego-boosting jaw parade to show he was the warrior to Donald Marmalade. He spoke to all the cameras which were focused just on him, ignoring all the generals as he sang his master's hymn. He finally ran out of puff. The gin was wearing off. 'Twas time to leave the podium and have another quaff. He bounded from the stage as all the generals stood attention, relieved to see the back of him and all that he had mentioned. Reminders of last June's parade, where ancient tanks were squeaking, came trudging Trump. The only sound was all his joints a-creaking. See, generals are non-partisan. They never lend applause to any politician. Makes no difference what their cause. The narcissist was bleating. He was used to adoration. The atmosphere was reeking from this under-awed formation. In contrast to the animated rantings of the Pete, the president bore lethargy from wig to tiny feet. He rambled of the war that was evolving from within. He must have meant the rotting in full swing inside his skin. Mumbling that new training grounds would start in cities blue, the 82nd Airborne could support his widespread coup. For Democrats were dangerous with ugly good intentions. All freedom for the masses was un-Trump, deserved attention. And never mind the consequence of such illegal acts. They'd all be pardoned if they bowed to President Humpback. Complaining of the stealthy ships the Navy had acquired, they just weren't ostentatious like the god of Ghosh admired. And furthermore, they're far too small, so let's build battleships. Big, beautiful, and cumbersome, a massive radar blip. The enemy should be aware that we are on the move. They'll quake inside their moccasins with everything to prove. Instead of H for choppers, let's have T for Trump instead. And paint them gold. The generals knew he'd lost his tiny head. At last the farce was over. This had been a test of training. Decades of strict discipline had saved their brains from straining. Some would go to war zones which were easier to cope than listening to the ravings of this pair of desperate dopes. Insults plus an injury capped off this circus act. The government was shut down and their rudder now was cracked. All travel funds were frozen, but the generals didn't fuss. A tactical withdrawal, even if they went by bus. When all the country's finest had once more resumed their posts, discussed the strange behaviour of their limp civilian hosts. If government malfunctioned when they had the leading margin, how could they run a conflict when the troops were poised for charging? Decisions were unanimous amongst these institutions to disobey the White House and uphold the Constitution. Let Pirate Pete and Duck Larange rant to the dwindling few. Allegiances were focused on the proud red, white and blue. Well, Pete and Donald had all their sycophants gather around them after this event and say what a wonderful, wonderful patriotic thing it was that they did, and to bring their generals and their forces into line. Whereas we in the rest of the world think, what a pair of idiots. How to make complete fools of yourself in front of such a huge audience. Anyway, it's all done now, and I'm sure there's been ructions in amongst the top brass of the military following that display, and who knows what will come of it. Anyway, hope you like the poem. Please like, share and subscribe, and click the notification bell so that YouTube can let you know when another one's coming. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye bye for now.